All right, welcome to day 3 now through 1st and 2nd Kings. Today, chapters number 5 and 6. As a brief recap, Solomon was getting set in. He was doing all the right things, it seemed like. Then God gives him wisdom. Then Solomon successfully demonstrates that wisdom. And then we have at the end of chapter number 4, the kingdom is not hungry or thirsty. They are satisfied. Their boundaries are large. Their people are large. I mean, these are the highest ways that one could state stability and success of a kingdom in the Old Testament. And so, I didn't leave us with this question, but there is this question now that is resonating. Do we have higher expectations of Solomon than of David now? Solomon appears to have less baggage going into the kingship, and his start has been phenomenal. Are the expectations higher for him than David? Saul, pretty much one of the first things he did was dissatisfy God. And so I think Solomon has already exceeded that of Saul, but maybe even that of David. We will have to wait and see. But now, as we go into chapter number 5 today, Solomon is gathering all the materials to build the temple. Now, David had wanted to build the temple, but David was a man of war. There was so much blood on his hands to where, God said, let your son do it. David had made some initial plans for the temple, but he wasn't to be the one to construct it. Although David did safeguard the Ark of the Covenant, which is the primary piece of furniture that would go into the temple. But David was having to fight a lot of wars, and Solomon, the kingdom is doing well. He's not having to fight wars. Things have been very peaceful, and he's been building these alliances with Egypt, which was always an important counterpart to Israel, even going back to Genesis and Exodus. I mean, what Egypt represented was tremendous, and having peace with them probably represented, in a sense, having peace with everybody, except maybe the Philistines, because, people probably didn't want peace with the Philistines, but they're subdued now. They're not causing trouble. Solomon is the man. Now, the idea of the temple, we find it back in the book of Exodus. There had been places of sacrifice that became sacred, altars that were built from the time of Genesis. But then at the time of the Exodus, during the stage where people were forming their group identity, they built this tabernacle, which was a tent. It was mobile, but it was viewed theologically as the place where God dwelled, and it had several different functions for the sacrificial system, which to Israel, as well as in the broader ancient Near East, sacrifice meant so much. And for them to sacrifice the fruit of the land or for their livestock, that was a tremendous sacrifice for them, given that was their livelihood. That was like taking money out of their pocket. I mean, it was. That's exactly what it was. The tabernacle represented not only the sacrifices that were, in a sense, looking at it, rooting it in one way, an appeasement to God, getting God's forgiveness, but also the throne of God, where God would dwell. And so now Solomon is going to pull together all of these resources, and the abundance of language here is just trying to show how impressive and how thought out this temple and its various building supplies were. It's important. If you've got a kingdom, you need a king. Remember, we went through this in 1 Samuel. The people said, give us a king. Well, in Hebrew theology, God was king when they became a people. When they became a solid group there in the Sinai Peninsula during the Exodus, that was the first time, really, theologically, we find in the Bible that they recognized God as king, because that was the first time they recognized a group identity. But even though it's recognized, well, God's really in charge of everything, there's been no temple that's built in Jerusalem. And Solomon, I mean, the most amazing thing that this man can do right now, especially in his kingship, is build this temple. That's, sure, he's going to get some credit for it, but it's going to take some attention away from him and give attention to God. And so, unlike Saul, Solomon seems to be very secure and very self-confident. The details of how it was built in chapter 6 are very striking. The language is bright flashing lights. It's a signpost. This is very significant to these people, because the temple was not only a worship center, but it became an ipso de facto cultural center. And here, let's see, I want to zero in on verses 11 through 13. God's approval came to Solomon. I'm not sure if we ever saw this kind of approval that we've seen in this very young book. I'm not sure we've seen this approval come to either of his predecessors as what's come to Solomon. This temple that you're building, if you follow my rules, observe my regulations and my commandments, I will fulfill you the promise I made to your father David. So it's very much an if, then circumstance. And that's what covenant was in the ancient world. Each party had to agree and fulfill their agreement. And here God is going to be with them as long as he remains in this covenant. And he's going to live among the Israelites. He's going to be their God there with them in the temple. And is not going to abandon the people. And that is the striking promise there. And so now 6 chapters in, and Solomon, everything he is touching is turning to gold. No pun intended, right? Because we read here in this chapter of the gold that he's putting into the temple. And so I'm getting a little concerned at this point, because our narratives have been up to this point. Something is going to go wrong at some point. What's going to go wrong now? It's when you're at the top, there's only one place to go. And I'm not making a prediction. I'm just drawing out a concern at this point. So this video is an ounce shorter, and I'll see you next time.